Trade rumors are really starting to escalate for the Toronto Maple Leafs surrounding Nick Robertson following his request to be traded away from the Toronto Maple Leafs, and one writer has proposed a blockbuster trade that could change everything for the Leafs. We're going to break that down as well as discuss prospect Cade Webber. He spoke out on his time with the Leafs and had some very interesting things to say about his future with the team. So stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we do, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, make sure to hit that button. We're on the road to 12,000 subscribers, and about 70% of you who are watching are not subscribed. So make sure to hit that button if you enjoy the content. Now, Darius, a lot to go over today, and we're going to be focusing on Nick Robertson as well as, of course, Cade Webber a little bit. But Nick Robertson requested a trade earlier on in the offseason. It was a little bit of a shock because both of us are pretty big fans of him. He's shown the ability to score at the NHL level, but it looks like now the Leafs are going to have to ship him off, and a couple of trade rumors are starting to escalate and kind of come out regarding Nick Robertson. Let's not waste any more time. So Hurricanes need to pursue Maple Leafs Nick Robertson in a trade, and this was dropped today as of the time of recording, and it basically links the Hurricanes to Nick Robertson, Darius, and I'm very curious to see what your thoughts are on this trade. Obviously, neither of us really want to trade Nick Robertson, but his time in Toronto seems to be coming to an end, and you can look at the proposed package. We'll dive into the exact pieces, but let's just get over it, or go over it first, sorry. Nick Robertson for Ryan Suzuki and a 4th-round pick, and you can see at the top there, one of the beat writers thinks that a trade could get done between the two sides, a prospect for prospect swap with a potential draft pick included on the Hurricanes side of things, because obviously Nick Robertson has a higher ceiling than Ryan Suzuki in theory, so you get a pick to compensate for that. But Darius, what are your thoughts on this trade? It's not a huge blockbuster, but I hate to see Nick Robertson even thrown in these trades.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to say that I really like Nick Robertson, and I think if they were to clean up his game, he would be a really good NHL player, and I don't think he's been given the opportunity that he needs to succeed at the NHL level yet. That being said, I guess his camp has come out and said we saw it just a couple days ago around free agency that they won't be re-signing with the Leafs, right? They want a trade. Doesn't mean the Leafs have to fulfill that wish, right? Like he has almost no leverage in a way, right? So they could hang on to him, and it sounds like Brad Living wants to hang on to him. We can get into that in a little bit too. But in terms of that mock trade, I just think Ryan Suzuki is nowhere close to what Nick Robertson will be in the NHL, right? Ryan Suzuki has played the last couple seasons in the AHL, and I mean the most amount of points he's put up in his season in the AHL is 32, right? So if you look at what Nick Robertson's done in the NHL with a very short leash and being in the doghouse a lot, he's done way more. So I think that with the 4th-round pick does not help. So this trade proposal, I think, is just throwing stuff at a wall, seeing if it sticks. I think you can get way more for Nick Robertson if you were to move on. That being said, I don't think he has that much leverage. And I think they want to hang on to him too, because they're probably going to need him this season, especially if they don't add at the forward position here in free agency, because, you know, a lot of guys there's not a lot left, right, to pick from, and you don't have a lot of salary cap space either. So I would prefer to hang on to this player, but I think you at least have to start exploring some trades too, because it sounds like, I don't know if, you know, they're just posturing, but it sounds like that he may not re-sign with them.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be in Toronto anymore, which unfortunately means that, again, I agree. This trade doesn't have enough value going that way. But at the same time, for other teams, I don't think they're going to be willing to give up a ton because Nick Robertson publicly requested a trade. And you can pause and read all this. I'm not going to go into it, but if you're interested about kind of the trade and why they think it could work, and you can see here it's a prospect for prospect swap, but again, I don't know for the Toronto Maple Leafs if that's a trade that you want to do. And you can see this here, while it's unclear if the Leafs would be willing to go along with Robertson's request, the Hurricanes should make an effort to see if the trade would happen, even though this trade in particular is very interesting. And you mentioned how Suzuki only had 32 points in the AHL. If you look at Robertson in the NHL last year, in only 56 games, he put up 14 goals and 13 assists. So when you're looking at a potential trade package between the Leafs and even any other team out there, I don't know exactly what his value would be. Like, you're probably not going to get a 1st-round pick for Nick Robertson, even though you could maybe negotiate that. What do you think a realistic package would be for a guy who publicly requested a trade, hasn't proven at the NHL level a ton, besides like last season was his biggest one, even though he has proven at the AHL level to be a very elite goal scorer, having one of the better seasons we've seen in a while from a Leafs prospect. But what are your thoughts on what do you think the Leafs could get for him, if not this trade, which I agree with, it probably wouldn't work.
I've seen a couple of people refer to like Barrett Hayden maybe from Utah, which I think has a higher ceiling than Ryan Suzuki at this point in time, right? And I think that could be an interesting option. Hayden, I think, can play center as well, so maybe that might fix your 3rd-line center problem-ish, even though it's not really a problem with Holmberg, but you would have a little bit more offense there, I think, instead of Holmberg there. So that could be an option too. Like I said, I think his ceiling is a little bit higher, but I still like Nick Robertson. Like, I don't know if you're not going to win this trade. I think this player goes to another team and really lights it up. I honestly do. Like, he is such a dynamic player offensively. Nobody on the Leafs shoots like this guy except for Austin Matthews. Like, his shot is lethal. And if they were to just work with him and give him some more, a better opportunity to succeed at what he's good at and work with him in the neutral zone and defensive side of the puck, I think he can be a really, really good player. Because again, he played in the playoffs, but it was because a couple guys were injured and he was just put in a place filler spot, right? Like, he wasn't given an opportunity to really shine. So I think if you work with this player and maybe try to mend that relationship, because it sounded like Brad Living didn't want to move on from Nick Robertson, I think that's the best course of action at this time.
Yeah, and we have a couple of other articles dropping regarding what his trade value could be. You can see this here, Robertson trade value. If you go into this article, assuming that someone was off or was willing to offer Nick Robertson the offer sheet, it would likely come at 1.5 to 2.3 million, which requires a third round pick as compensation, which would presumably be the bare minimum of what the Leafs would take back as a return for Robertson. And given that Robertson is a 22-year-old that scored on a 20-goal pace last season despite Keefe's doghouse, I don't think it's crazy to suggest that the value, especially when he wasn't getting much in the way of ice time. So like a third round pick at the very least. Again, I could see a prospect in a third. Now, Darius, if this ended up being Suzuki and a second or Suzuki and a third, maybe you're getting a bit more value there and it makes a bit more sense. But a fourth almost seems like a slap in the face for a guy who is much better than Suzuki and has proven that at the NHL level to a degree, even though he hasn't been giving a ton of leeway in that front. So let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on this and what do you think a Nick Robertson trade would look like. But Darius, let's discuss Cade Webber. Speaking out, obviously he was acquired during the playoffs. He's a prospect this last season. So Cade Webber at the Leafs development camp, he said, quote, "I take pride in being that defensive defenseman, blocking shots. I know this is just the beginning. I have a ton more work to do." You love to see that out of any prospect, but Cade Webber has been garnering some traction around the Leafs camp and Leafs Nation, and he's an exciting prospect.
Yeah, he is. And like you said, they acquired him during the playoffs. There's a lot of chatter about that. He won the Defensive Defenseman of the Year last year, put up great numbers, right? At least defensively. Like, don't look at this guy to score, right? But he's a big defenseman too. That's the other thing. Another big body. Like, Brad Living's building a really big blue line, even moving into the future, not just next season, right? So I'm excited about this guy. There's a couple of videos floating around of him blocking shots in development camp, like working on drills like that. So the Leafs are really putting a lot of emphasis on drills like that now. I feel like hockey, in a way, is moving, backwards, right? Like, everyone's emphasizing physicality more again, right? And as you see in the playoffs, like, that matters, right? You can't just have speed and skill. So they're really emphasizing this stuff in development camp, which I like. And like I said, if you want to go check out the videos, they're all over Twitter. So really encouraging to see. And it sounds like he's enjoying his time too and working with some of the staff. So it's cool.
Yeah, and the Leafs have been stocking up on a ton of different defensive prospects, players. We saw some other minor signings there. You see this. I take pride, like I mentioned earlier. That's a big thing here. I know they're going to put all they can into developing me, referring to the Toronto Maple Leafs development camp. And that's super exciting to have a prospect to do that and just kind of speak out and be excited to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs, which hopefully he can make an impact because the Leafs need defensemen, even though their core looking up to this upcoming season, is very, very good. But let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on that. That'll wrap it up. We'll see you soon.